Oh, hello there. Yes, well, the weekend starts here. Well, it does for me anyway, yeah. A couple of cancellations, so I've got a kind of buckshy day today. What shall I do? Stare at the rain. Anyway, I thought today we'd investigate some of those little quirks and foibles, one might say, of the British media. They do like to make up their own rules and then sort of desperately pretend that those rules definitely make loads and loads of sense and don't have any just exceptions just for them and their mates. We had this from the gorgeous and pouting Jake yesterday in the Telegraph. Trump has demolished the liberal myth. Migrants shouldn't be treated equally. Yes, and that got me thinking about certain people that are migrants, and about the way that they shouldn't be treated equally. I mean, I'm sure Jake would agree with me that if, for example, you were a fifth or sixth generation person living in Brooklyn, came across maybe, I don't know, from somewhere like Poland or Russia, several hundred years ago in terms of the family, that, if you were to suddenly plonk yourself down on someone else's land that had, basically didn't belong to you, you really shouldn't be treated equally, should you? But, I don't think Jake would agree with me on that, oddly enough. Yes, it's strange that certain people, depending on, whether or not God has blessed them, have to have a whole bunch of human rights and other people just don't. But I'm not too sure about the equality one there. It's a bit iffy, isn't it, that as a concept? And there was quite a bit of that on display as well. We had this from Kemi. Kemi Badenoch. You may recall she used to be the leader of the Conservative Party. Before Robert Jenrick took over, wasn't it? Anyway, we have been told for at least about the last 5 or 6 years that it is absolutely vital that we leave the EHCR. That's the only thing that can be done. And but here she's going to launch a review into it, which strikes me as slightly odd. The Commission will look at ways to counter lawyers using human rights legislation to subvert government. Or just obeying the law, as one might put it in a different way. But I'm guessing with this, it's the fact that it's maybe just someone just has woken up to the fact that we've had human rights legislation entwined into British law for, in real terms, hardwired into most of British law since, let's be generous about it, the 1990. And in order to try and stop this stuff, in order to, stop the bad people using the bad lefty lawyers, it can't realistically be done. And if we are going to leave the ECHR, which we can do if you want to, keep saying this to people, if you want to do that, it's really, it's fine, it's a really good idea, then we will basically be in the club with Belarus and Russia, who are very fine democratic nations. Yes, we do have this whole thing. We're about, treating people equally under the law. And it's a big problem. I mean, the last time the Conservatives said they were going to bring in a Bill of Rights, they got nowhere with it. I think that was Grant Shapps, who effectively you can't be done because you basically then got to enshrine very much in British law all of that stuff about equality. Yeah, you've really got to do it. And unfortunately, what that means is you've got to put up with that whole free speech and treating people equally thing. Tricky, isn't it? When, honestly, if you don't believe that people are equal, you really don't want to do that. Anyway, we had this from Edward Lee. I was quite chuffed with this one way or another. Locked out of Downing Street, the PM's minders wouldn't let us deliver a letter to his front door on behalf of the suffering people of Palestine. Recognise their right to their own state now. Yes. And again, it's one of those brilliant sort of notions about free speech and, allowing people to, basically not be killed, which is an ECHR thing, I guess, or is it a kind of, diversity hire bit? I don't really know. I get slightly confused about those things, but I did have to sort of smile at the notion that that he might be Hamas now. Yeah, somebody who's sort of woken up. I mean, he's a Brexiteer. Is Brexiteer and very anti-migrant, and yet somebody who basically old-fashioned Tory actually recognises that maybe there are some things that basically we do need to have in law, like equality, that whole lefty lawyer thing, I suppose. Anyway, just in a similar vein, you may recall that there was the story of the hard done by Druid priestess in training who got kicked off a training course for, oh gee god, I don't know why I'm saying this, but anyway, got kicked off a training course for druids because she was she was transphobic, effectively. When you read up about this, I mean, it wasn't that there was anyone trans there, as far as I can make out. I've read pretty much every article I can find on this. It was just simply that people didn't want to be around her, and obviously that's really bad because, you know, I mean, we can't have people not putting up with bigots. I mean, we have to put up with bigots. It's not the law, obviously, but it should be. I mean, just look at Graham Linehan. I mean, the guy's done absolutely nothing wrong apart from just being a really, really obnoxious, obsessive person who, for some reason, is sort of drifting into the outer limits of mental health. Anyway, in order, inevitably, for the British media to give its backing to transphobes, they're prepared to just look the other way with whoever they are, well, fellow travellers with. So I had to smile at this, which was from Talk TV. It's our Kev, who's interviewing Arthur Pendragon, who's a druid, apparently. Okay? Yeah, his actual name is John. Okay, he identifies, think about that, right? He identifies as Arthur Pendragon. Yes, you know, I mean, if you can be generous about that, you might say it's a legend, but let's face it, it's mythological, isn't it? Anyway, which excluded from paganism for trans and single-sex views, and he was basically saying that it shouldn't have happened, or whatever, I don't care. But they got me thinking about the way that it's perfectly acceptable for this bloke, who a few years ago, let's say 20 years ago, would have been regarded as a stinking tree hugger, because that's his background of sort of like, sort of lefty demonstrations at Stonehenge, etc. And yet here he is, and because he is basically becoming one of us, that he just gets a free ride. But think about that self-identification thing, okay? It's dreadful if someone identifies as a woman, if you don't want them to. But it's fine for him to identify as some mythical person and a druid, you know? Dear God, what's going on in the world? And you think about any religion, like Jake's, for example. I mean, if there's an ultimate view about people choosing to be something that they don't have to, it surely is religion, isn't it? Now, you can believe anything you like. That's in many ways a human right, and it should be. But we do live in a country where you can't believe anything you like, because the media will simply decide whether or not, arbitrarily, whether or not you're a good or bad person, depending on whether or not you are part of the flavour of the week. So, I don't know, it might be worthwhile keeping a little scorecard or something as to how bigoted you have to be to certain people this week, because you can't keep up with it. Because if you're a Tory backbencher who's a member of the old style party, eventually you will fall foul of these people and become persona non gratis at best. Now, that makes it sound like an authoritarian system, doesn't it? But you'd be a fool and a communist to believe that. Anyway, do have a glorious Friday. And if you're at work, good for you. I'm glad that you are, because I might be using some of your services later on. Hooray! That's the way the economy works, folks, isn't it? Enjoy.